time, Judy has always asked that during March, we also do a focus on backup. And we want to continue with what we started last week, this week more with a Linux focus. And we're going to share with you two different programs or procedures or systems of doing some backup. And we're going to start off with Drew King. Drew was with us last week, if you're with us. He's from Sarasota, Florida, and he owns his own company called King Consulting, and kind of got into that because he saw the bubble bursting when he was just becoming a senior engineer or exchange administrator for a global company. And all of a sudden he says, man, this is great. And then all of a sudden, you know, things are starting to kind of come down. So he does that. He's also a reseller, trainer, and supporter of Dragon Naturally Speaking software. A lot of you have heard that, which is one of the ones that's been around a while that you can just talk and it'll do the typing for you. But the interesting thing that I found was that Drew worked with doctors with voice recognition and the disabled. And he even helped teach a person who was a quadriplegia to communicate via computer while on a ventilator. So he's got a lot of computer background. He's got a degree in computer stuff. And today he's going to share with you a program that he mentioned to me. And I said, I don't know anything about it. Why don't you teach me? And so he's going to do that. So Drew, I'm going to turn things over to you.
All right, thanks everybody. I'm going to start off by sharing my screen if I can. Share screen one. And hopefully everybody can see.
Yes, we can.
Great screen. Can everybody see what looks like a presentation?
I can see it.
Great. And what I need to do is not that. I'm running, before I continue, on a Windows computer with a Linux virtual machine. So that's the platform that I'll be demoing on today. And the Linux machine is Linux Mint. And let me bring this larger. And Duplicati is the name of the program that we'll be looking at today. And it uses a browser user interface as its management console. And before I continue, you're probably not going to need to do this for my presentation because I've made sure, I think, that everything is zoomed in properly. If anything looks to be too small on the screen, at the top of your screen, there is a view options choice where you can make the screen a little bit bigger. I don't think that you'll need it today, but in the future, if things look too small on the screen for you when you're doing a Zoom meeting, you can try zooming to a larger screen size. I took a quick poke at ChatGPT last week. By the way, it's been upgraded to version 4 today. This is what ChatGPT said of Duplicati, that it's an open source backup application that has no server-side components and very good for doing cloud-based backups. The rest of it has nothing to do with chat. Duplicati 2.0 is a free backup software program that can operate on Windows, MacOS, and Linux. And it's open source, not only for personal use, but can be used for commercial purposes as well. Duplicati was designed to do online backups. It is data efficient and can handle network interrupts, resumed from failed backups, network latency, and things like that. It handles its files and folders with a strong AES encryption, And that strong AES encryption is based on a password paraphrase that you give it, so that you decide exactly how strong that encryption is going to be. When you start your backups, it uses, it asks you to type in basically a master password. And that master password is something that you can't ever forget, because it's encrypting your backups. You can leave them unencrypted if you wish. And it has the ability to do scheduled backups, and it self-updates itself. And you can also use GPG if you so want to. Duplicati works with a lot of different backends for doing the backups. It works with simple programs like FTP. It also, I'm going to be doing a demonstration of how it backs up to a popular service called Backblaze, Microsoft OneDrive, and Google Drive. You can back up, if you wish to an external USB hard drive or a thumb drive, a shared folder on the same network, or network attached storage. The popular protocols that it uses are the FTP, S3, and SFTP. I'm going to be demonstrating S3 is Backblaze, I should say, is S3 compatible. For those of you who know what S3 stands for, it's Amazon's web storage services. I believe they created S3. I'm not sure. SFTP is another secure file transfer protocol that operates in a secure shell that I will also be demonstrating. And here is a more detailed listing of some of the backend providers that it supports. And on Windows, it just requires Windows Vista or Windows Server, pretty much any version of Linux and MacOS. Because of the way that it's designed, for those of you who are familiar with the term Raspberry Pi or network attached storage, Duplicati is very well oriented to working on those platforms. Duplicati can make backups of files that are opened by other processes. On Windows, it uses a snapshot of the file system using volume shadow copy services. And on Linux, it uses the LVM to do backups. Duplicati needs about 40 megabytes of free hard space on your local hard drive, and it will take up to a few gigabytes more. It creates a database and keeps track of everything that you're backing up on your computer to whatever you're backing it up to. So, and it references that local database to make things a little bit faster for doing data retrieval and restores. Duplicati stores everything in blocks. It's not a file backup program like something that just merely copies the file from point A to point B. It actually stores things in what it calls blocks, and these blocks are in chunks of 50 megabytes by default. You can set them to be as big or small as you want. What Duplicati is not, it is not a file synchronization program. It uses data blocks files are split up into small chunks of data, which can be optionally compressed and encrypted and sent before they are sent to their backup location. All encryption is done on your local computer, so that when the files transmit over the network, they are already encrypted, regardless of what the destination server is. Duplicati can make a backup of selected files and folders, but it is not an imaging disk backup program, and it's also not good for backing up cloud files. Duplicati is a free and open source program that, again, as I said, it does offer strong encryption, and it uses a policy called NTO, trust no one. The data is encrypted locally before it is transferred to the remote storage system, and a password key that you create controls, who has access to the data. The first time you run a backup, it's going to do a full backup automatically. Afterwards, Duplicati will update it using an incremental backup method, and it backs up the changed data portions only. So if you have a large file that you've backed up and you make some edits to it, it will figure out what bits and pieces of the file it needs to put on the storage server rather than doing a copy of the entire file. File compression is done using either the zip format or the 7-zip format style of compression. If the file is determined to already be compressed, it will simply leave it alone. Let me get this out of the way. If it's an MPEG file or an MKV file, which is a video file, it just leaves it alone because those files are pretty well compressed already. It handles online backup verification, so it confirms everything that it does. And it works very well to avoid corruption and failures. It supports a feature called deduplication. What is deduplication? It analyzes the contents of the files and stores the data in, as I said, blocks. And due to that, Duplicati will find duplicate files and similar content and store them only once in the backup. It analyzes the contents of files, and can handle the situations that vary as files having been renamed or moved. It has the ability to handle various kinds of network hiccups and interrupts, and it has a web-based interface. For those of you who are true Unix users, they did not forget about you. Duplicati does offer a full set of command line options for those of you who would like to run scripts and backup in a terminal window. Duplicati also stores the metadata for the files. It can be scheduled to run automatically, whether you want it to run every day, every week, every few hours, every few minutes, and it's self-updating. When a file is in use by another process that can't be read, it uses the volume shadow copy, as I think I mentioned that already. And for Linux, it uses the logical volume manager. The backup process. I'm going to try and make this as not dry as it is. Traditional backup software does a full backup. And then if you want to do incrementals, those incrementals have to be then restored one at a time after the full backup is done. This can be cumbersome and error prone. Making a full backup every day is time consuming and resource unfriendly. So what Duplicati does is it combines the best of both of those worlds, and it automatically handles whether it's going to do a full backup or an incremental backup for you. You don't pick and choose which one you're going to do. And it makes sure that a full backup is available on the remote storage server and that all data can be restored without replacing or replaying incrementals one after the next after the next. Imagine your local files being in small bricks. Duplicati takes your files and breaks them down into a single brick and stores these bricks in little bags. When a bag is full, it stores them on the server. And then when they change, it manages the bricks in these little bags. And when a local file needs to be restored, Duplicati knows by looking at its database what bricks it needs to restore and from what bags they're in. And from time to time, Duplicati will notice that there are a few bags that contain bricks that it doesn't need anymore, and it will do essentially self-maintenance on the backup database and make sure that only the data that needs to be up on the server, on the backup server, is on the backup server. And again, there is no need to do uploading full backups on a regular basis. It makes it a good choice for doing incrementals of large media libraries. I did a music backup of a directory of 2 files that were 7 megabytes each. And I'll show you in the file system that the backup directory is only 7 megabytes, even though there are 14 megabytes of files in the directory. I took a file and I just copied it to the same directory with a new name. And Duplicati was able to back up both files. It can restore both files, even though the server only contains 7 megabytes of information. I'll be doing a demonstration using the Backblaze backend, their B2 storage integrations. B2 is Backblaze's proprietary backend for doing backups, and Duplicati supports it. Their basic storage for 1 terabyte is $60. And this is how a little comparison grid to some of their competition. Duplicati is a partner of Backblaze. This is just a clipping from the Backblaze website, advertising the Duplicati software as something that they support. Duplicati, again, has deduplication, a technique used to eliminate the duplication of data in the backup. So that if you have 2 files that are very large and take up a lot of space on your local machine, they will not take up twice the storage or 3 times the storage in your backups. Backblaze being a cloud service, files are available at any time through one of 2 ways, either the API, which is the software that you're using to do the backup, or you can use just a regular web browser and download the files. Bear in mind that they're not going to be, in this case, files that you can use directly because they're going to be in the backup format. They'll be in compressed zip files. If you want to play around, Backblaze does offer 10 gigabytes of free storage. And you can get up to 1 gigabyte of free downloads per day. They charge not just by how much storage space you use, but by how much you use it. And that's what Amazon does as well, is they charge based on usage, not just on how much you have. But they give you 10 gigabytes to play with for free if you want to do that. And when you create what they call a little storage bucket, you'll be given by them an application key ID and an application key, which is the password. It's basically a user ID and a password, and to your data. It stores data in what they call a bucket, and you can define a bucket to be a computer or an app or a sales, or not a sales, either data or an application. This is my little representation of what my backups look like on the cloud. I have 2 computers that I've defined in the cloud, and I can back them up individually, or I can go into my software and back up and access the software and the data through the software. This is a little snapshot of what the login interface looks like at Backblaze. When you first log in, you'll want to navigate to their cloud B2 cloud storage and click on the buckets option. And it will give you the opportunity to, if you don't have one, create for the first time a new bucket. And this is what you'll see. It'll just say create bucket, and it'll walk you through process, and it'll give you your user ID and password for that bucket. I'll be doing a demonstration of backing up data to a Windows computer, my host computer. And to do that, I'm using Microsoft's Open SSH server program. And this is just a little example of it running in the services program on Windows. This comes free with Windows. It's just not enabled by default. I've just went into settings and add remove programs, and in there you can enable and disable SSH server. SSH server works hand in hand with SFTP, and I've included in the notes when you get your handouts. This is a hyperlink that you'll get the clickable hyperlink in the notes to the instructions on how to enable SSH server in Windows if you want to do backups of all of your computers at once from your Linux machine. You can set up your backups on Linux and back up your Windows computer, your Mac computer, your Linux computer, all from one place. And SSH and SFTP, the backup drive can be located on any computer in your network. I have my backup drive attached to a Windows computer, even though I'm using a Linux-based backup system. And this is also true for the free file sync software that you'll be seeing after I'm finished with my demo. This is just an example of an SSH SFTP app that you can, if you have an Android cell phone, you can do backups of your Android phone using a free SSH server. You just need to create a fake user ID and password on your cell phone, and you'll be able to do backups if you want to of your cell phone. I use a program called WinSCP personally to do SFTP with my Android phone, for those of you who have an interest in that. That we can skip, and that we can skip. In Duplicati, you can go into settings and allow remote access to the backup. So for example, even though the backup is running on Linux, you can be on your Windows computer and pull up the backup console and manage your backups and do restores from any computer on your network. Remote administration is also available using an SSH tunnel, which for those of you who know how to do SSH tunneling, which is a little bit more of an advanced topic than we're going to cover today, I do have an SSH tunnel set up between Windows and Linux on my computer that I will show you. And this is supported on all platforms, Windows, Mac, as well as Linux. And now we'll go on to the demonstration of the actual software. So let me minimize this, and I will go to my Linux computer and put in my password. And this is what the console looks like running in a terminal window, in a browser window. If I were to go to my host computer, this is what it looks like on Windows, and I'll put in a password. And it shows me the same exact window. So I'm looking at, if you follow my mouse has a little yellow dot around it, where you should see a little yellow dot to help make the mouse pointer be a little bit easier to follow. This is going to the machine IP address on port 8200, where the software operates. And this window over here is running on localhost on port 6999, where I did my SSH tunnel. And I just issued that very command that was SSH -L, and it's in the notes, so I'm not going to cover it on here. I just wanted to show you more about the product. In Linux, I've done a few different backups of different kinds. The first one I did was my downloads folder to Backblaze. And if I go in and edit the backup, you'll see that the first thing it wants you to do is just give it a name. And this is where you decide whether or not you're going to encrypt your backup or not. whether you want to use AES or GNU Privacy Guard. And if you choose to use an encryption, it will ask you to put in a paraphrase, and it will use this paraphrase to encrypt your backups. When I go to the next tab, this is where I chose in the storage type that I wanted to use Backblaze cloud storage from all of the different provider options that are available. And this is the bucket that I created, my Linux files, and the folder path. And this is the application ID and the password key that was given to me by Backblaze when I set up the backup process. And if I test the connection, it should come back and say that it works. Yay. And the next thing that it looks for is what you want to back up is the source. And in this case, I chose my downloads folder. And if I were to, this is where I could set my volume size to be 50 megabytes or anything different. If I want to change any advanced options, I can do that here. And I'll hit save. Or disable encryption. Oops, I need to go back and let me just go that way, go that route. So if I were to get rid of this again, go into my downloads folder, and let's say this is the Duplicati software program, and I'll delete both of them so that the name Duplicati doesn't exist anymore in my downloads folder. And I'll just delete them. And now I will go in here and choose that a restore of files. And it's going to ask me, oops, not the right backup. Downloads to Backblaze. I want to restore files. And it's going to give me the option to back up, to do a restore from a prior backup or the latest backup. And how many backups I've done will determine how many choices I have. And if I select my most recent backup, here is the files, and I'll just select the Duplicati files and hit continue. I can, if I wish to, put them in their original location, or I can pick a new place to put them. And I'll just hit restore. And it's going to go out to Backblaze and download the files. And hopefully in a few seconds from now, it will say that it's all done. And I'll have the ability to go into the downloads folder and see those files having been restored properly. And I'll go in here, and here are my Duplicati files back again. And so that was 30 megabytes that it just restored in a few seconds. The next backup that I did was I created a backup of music files, and I chose to use the SFTP backup method. And it's backing up to my Dell, and it's backing up to an SSD drive that's hooked up to the back of the Dell computer. And how did I do that? What I did is I went in and I chose to use the SFTP SSH storage type. And I had to put in the IP address of my backup computer. And the default port number for SSH is 22, and that's true on Windows, Linux, and Mac. And the path on the server that I chose was d:/APCUG Duplicati. And Jake is the username in Windows that I have set up for the backups. And on my computer, this is what the backup files look like. I'm looking at the external hard drive right now, and this is what the backup files look like. They have been zipped and not encrypted, because this particular backup, I did not choose the AES encryption. If they were encrypted, it would have the words AES in the file name. And I'll test the connection again just to make sure that everything is kosher and it works. And I'll go to next. And in here, I chose to back up my music files. And I did not choose, if I go in and say that I want to run automated backups, this is where I can pick when I will next run the backup and whether I want to run it every number of minutes, every number of hours, every number of days, weeks, months, or years. And so you can have pretty fine granular control over how often you do your backups. And again, I'm choosing to use LZMA backup zip compression, and I'll just hit save and continue. And so if I were to get rid of the Dell file manager and go into my music folder and delete, I have two files here that it's the same music file with just a different name, and I'm going to delete both of them just so that the file folder is empty. And I'm going to go into music, and I'm going to say that I want to restore my music. And it found the files, and I can restore both of them just as easily as I did the other files, even though they're coming from a local hard drive rather than a backup storage server. And all the files have been restored correctly, and I'll go look, and here they are again. And the last backup that I did that I wanted to show you was a OneDrive backup. I took my documents folder and I backed it up to a OneDrive computer from Microsoft. And the way that you set up that is actually very simple. I chose to use AES encryption, and I gave it a paraphrase. And I chose the storage type Microsoft OneDrive. When you choose Microsoft OneDrive for the first time, it gives you a button over here called Auth ID. And if you click on it, it pops up a box where it will walk you through the authentication to your Microsoft account. And it will create for you this little bunch of numbers and letters, which is the auth key, auth ID for my OneDrive account. And in this browser tab over here is these are the actual backup files on my OneDrive account. And you can see that they have a .zip and AES file extension because they're encrypted. So if I were to log into OneDrive, this is what the files look like in the file system. And I'll do it next. And in this particular one, I chose to just back up my documents folder, and next, and next. Now, if I want to restore a particular version of a file, it all depends on how many times the file has been backed up. So if I go in to do a restore, it will list for me all of the times that I've backed up that file. And if you have backed it up every day, I don't have it on automation, so it doesn't have a ton of backups. But this is how you would restore a file to a previous version in time. If you wanted to restore a file from this morning or from yesterday, you would just go in and pick the appropriate file and restore it. And there's nothing here to do. I'm not going to restore anything. And that is about it for the software program and how Duplicati works to do backups and restores. So at this point, I can take any questions that anybody has about the product.
Drew, we're going to hold your questions, and you after John's presentation, I'll start with yours in the chat box.
Okay,
Thank you so much. Perfectly clear.
and now we will figure out how to stop sharing.
Up at the top,
Uh,
stop share.
yeah, I have, oh, it's on my other screen. There we go.
Ah, I only have one screen. See, I don't have those problems.
There we go.